leg of that team. And Heather Jackson's I'm gonna hand it over to you in just a minute. First, let me start the recording. Oh no, we're good. We're recording. Okay,
Sorry.
So we're recording. So I'm gonna hand it over to Heather in a minute. Heather is the founder of Realm of Caring, which I refer to often as an advocacy group. She'll tell you more about it, specifically what it is and what it does. But she has half a decade, 5-6 years of personal experience in this, and has tapped into decades of research and all the best minds in this arena. And so rather than us pick her brain and then try to regurgitate that info back to you, we invited her to join us as a team, and she was super gracious to make time. I know we wanted to do this sooner, but she was in Germany presenting research and just all over the place doing what she does. So we're going to kind of have that conversation that is being recorded. You can ask questions. You can ask in the chat. I've got Facebook open, so you can post in the event. We're going to keep it under an hour if we can. And I'm sure this will raise questions. So, Heather, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you kind of take it from there while this one eats chocolate and fruit snacks.
She has chocolate and her oils.
Oils, chocolate and oils. What more do you need?
She's a girl.
You actually don't need anything more than chocolate and oils, is my opinion.
Oils.
So can you guys hear me okay then?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. So, first I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity, because anytime I get a chance to talk about my story and my history, I want to be able to do that. So my name's Heather Jackson. I am the co-founder and the CEO of a nonprofit organization called the Realm of Caring, and I'm also a wellness advocate. So I have used doTERRA oils every single day for over 2 years now, and the reason why I know so much about cannabidiol or CBD or hemp or cannabis, lots of different names, we'll kind of dive into all of that. If that's sounding a little bit like French and all these initials and letters and doesn't make much sense, I'm going to really try and break it down for you. So my son, Zakai, who's now 14, has a very severe, intractable form of epilepsy called Doza syndrome, and started having seizures when he was 4 months old. And by the time he was 5, he had had over 500,000 seizures. So these are very brief, very violent seizures. He has 6 different seizure types. And by the time he was 9, he was actually receiving hospice palliative services. So we live in Colorado, and in our state we have some wonderful programs for families. And so his prognosis was poor. He was not expected to live into adulthood. We had been through 17 pharmaceuticals, embarrassingly, and every alternative therapy you could imagine. Essential oils was introduced early on, herbs, chiropractor, acupuncturist, and iridologist. I mean, you name it. If you wanted to take my money with the promise of helping my son, I gave it to you. So that was sort of our history, and we were a decade into that of daily seizures. And it's kind of a last-ditch effort to improve his quality of life. We began using cannabis, and particularly CBD or cannabidiol. And cannabidiol is a non-psychoactive component of the cannabis plant, particularly the hemp variety of plant. And so I was able to, of course, tune in to the doTERRA conference to listen to some of the presentations that were given. So I was really interested in some of the information that was being presented about Copaiba, and some of the information and the comparisons actually just weren't accurate. And so immediately everyone knows that this is what I've done for a very long time. And so I started getting text messages and Facebook messages, and I said, I'm going to write a blog about that. And then, I wish I had more hours in the day. So I haven't been able to do that quite yet, but I'm really glad to be able to present some of this information to you. So what I want to do is, so I wanted to give you my story. The long story short is that my son's seizures completely remitted using a hemp-based cannabis product. So hemp is less than 0.3% THC. And within 3 months, his seizures remitted. And he remained that way for close to 4 years. And he is having seizures again right now. He has been having seizures for about the last year. So this has become not only my passion, but an area of expertise for me. Even though I do not have initials behind my name, I am just a mom, but have about 12,000 hours of research underneath my belt in regards to cannabinoids, particularly CBD or cannabidiol. And indeed just got back from Germany and Zurich and Canada earlier. So we're doing some really great research on folks that are using CBD. So I'm going to talk from 2 points of view today, what the research and data suggests. So if we have research that would express a mechanism of action or how this works in our body, I can talk about that. And I can talk about the data that we've collected. So we serve 41,000 families at the Realm of Caring. All of them almost exclusively with life-limiting conditions or very hard to treat medical conditions, and those families are turning to cannabinoid products. And so what we started was some research projects. We have about 7 of them, and we work with very reputable institutions, University of Pennsylvania, Johns Hopkins University, Harvard. We have a new project launching with CSU in about a month. And so we're very interested in furthering the research. The other thing that we do is we have a call center, and we call it our care center, and it's staffed with 9 people who speak 5 languages, who take about 8,500 inquiries a month. So when you're talking about cannabis, cannabinoids, CBD, hemp, and its therapeutic use, there's not an organization that's collected more data or that is giving more information and education than the Realm of Caring Foundation. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about Realm of Caring. So research, education, of course, through the call center. We have 750 doctors that are connected with us as well. Doctors are our 3rd highest referral source, which is awesome. So they've learned that we're a really reputable institution to get folks to answer their questions. So we also do that. And then we also give financial grants. And that's my favorite thing to do. So we give money away every month to families to offset the cost of a therapy that the insurance company's not covering. So it'd be really cool to do that for essential oils as well. So that's a little bit about the Realm of Caring. And I feel that, as you heard the term used, every home needs a healer. And I think that people come to us as wellness advocates to be a reliable source of information. They ask us questions and they expect us to be educated. And so I just wanted to be able to, to talk about this in a really educated way. So one of the things that was brought up in the talk was quality. And I think that that's a really important thing to bring up about the quality of products. A couple of the things that were mentioned was really low cannabinoid content or no cannabinoid content in the products, meaning so it would be perhaps even labeled as a certain milligrams of CBD, and then there's no CBD in the product. And so I think that that absolutely is true. In fact, we just did a study that will be releasing next month that is exposing this problem within the industry, within the hemp industry, the CBD hemp industry. But I think that this exists in all industries. We certainly know it exists in the essential oil industry. People who maybe market their product as an essential oil, and it's a fragrance, a synthetic fragrance of, lavender or something like that. So I think that it's our role to educate consumers on how to assess the quality of a product. And really, so they can ask the right questions to know that they're getting a quality product. So I think that it's absolutely valid that there are some players in the game, if you will, who aren't doing it right, who felt like this would be a good opportunity to make money off of sick people. And there's definitely those organizations and companies that are out there. And so I feel like as a parent who had very limited options for over a decade. I'm not into limiting options. I'm into educating so that way consumers can make informed decisions, ask the right questions they'll then use their pocketbook to control that market. So just like I wouldn't talk bad about another essential oil company, I would only say, look, these are the things that doTERRA does that knock my socks off. I love the co-impact sourcing. I love the quality of the oils. I love that it's tested. I love that we're using sustainable procedures to get the oils, all of those things. So I would just talk about why we're great, not put down, other products. So I think that's that one thing that I would encourage us to do as wellness advocates is talk about quality, certainly, and educating consumers on how to find quality products. So one of our missions at the Realm of Caring is to do that. And on our website, we do have some information for families to be able to ask the right questions to find quality products. So I agree that that's an issue. I guess my point is that I think that's an issue in all different markets, including the essential oil market. And yes, it's sad, and it also happens. So I think the quality thing was definitely something that I wanted to bring up. And then I just kind of wanted to break down what it is that we're going to be talking about today. So Copaiba oil is a resin, and it's removed from the tree, the Copaiba tree. And the Brazilian folk medicine used it primarily as an anti-inflammatory. I went to PubMed, which is one of my favorite websites to go do digging around and do some research. So pubmed.com, PUBMED.com, and I typed in Copaiba. And I was able to find, 117 different peer-reviewed research articles about that oil, and lots of really interesting, incredible things. Anti-inflammatory, which is sort of how it was traditionally used in Brazilian folk medicine. It also has some cytotoxic properties, some anti-cancerous properties, some antimicrobial properties, wound healing, and anti-ulcer properties as well. So those were all, and so I'm not making claims, to be quite clear. You can go to PubMed, type in the oil name, and review the peer-reviewed research yourself. So I encourage you to do that. And then CBD, or cannabidiol, is extracted from the cannabis plant, namely the hemp plant. So just your run-of-the-mill cannabis that you would, go get from a dispensary is probably not going to have very much CBD, if any, in it at all. So this is kind of a unique product, if you will, and it's really gained a lot of attention over the last 5 years in particular, and our foundation's been covered. We've been really blessed to get some good media attention. So a lot of people are trying to create CBD-based products. So CBD is namely coming from the hemp variety, or the hemp, what we call a chemovar. And hemp, again, is less than 0.3% THC. And that's sort of a US standard. The hemp products that are imported into the United States have to be less than 0.3% THC. That's hemp milk, that's hemp seeds. All of those things have to be less than 0.3. That's sort of a US guideline. CBD has about 92 mechanisms of action on our body. So there's some really key ways that it acts on our body, and there's some things that are very similar about cannabidiol and Copaiba oil. Is it Copaiba or Copaiba? How do you guys pronounce it? Maybe it doesn't matter. Copaiba.
Yeah, they sort of, we've heard Copaiba, Copaiba.
Copaiba.
Various.
Okay.
I use pie. Like
You
I like
say
pie.
tomato, I say tomato.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll call it Copaiba oil. And so in a lot of ways, it's very similar. And in fact, in a lot of ways, cannabidiol or CBD acts very similar to essential oils and how it works in our body and the different mechanisms. And when I started learning about essential oils, I was thrilled because it just really resonated with me, and my kind of mission to remove toxins and chemicals and not use things that are not natural in my home and with my family. So when I started learning about essential oils, I was like, wow, this is pretty incredible. So I think one of the things that we need to understand, and this was mentioned in Dr. Hill's talk, was, our endocannabinoid system, that everything with a spine and some things without a spine have an endocannabinoid system. And our endocannabinoid system is a relatively new discovery. This surfaced in 1994, and it is in fact the largest regulating system in our body. And its sole purpose is to bring our body into homeostasis or balance. And so there's cannabidiol does act on this system. THC, the psychoactive component of cannabis, does act on this system. Beta-caryophyllene, which is a terpene that's very high in copaiba oil, acts on this system as well. So there are many different things that act on this system. So keeping in mind that this system is the largest regulating system in our body, that it's responsible for balance, for homeostasis, and that our bodies actually create endocannabinoids, so endogenous chemicals that mimic the cannabis plant. Or I guess you could say the cannabis plant maybe mimics our endogenous cannabinoids, but it's an incredibly interesting system. And it's something that medical doctors are not even being taught, even today when they graduate medical school. This system is a responsive system to trauma. So any point in your body that's not in homeostasis, that's not in balance, that has trauma, is riddled with receptors. We have CB1 receptors primarily in our brain and in our neurological system. They're not exclusively there, but that's mainly where they're concentrated. So in our brain and down our spinal cord, and is responsible for our central nervous system functioning and our neurological functioning. And then we also have CB2 receptors. They were really creative. So CB1, cannabinoid receptor 1 for the endocannabinoid system, CB2 receptors, cannabinoid receptor 2. Super creative. And that's in our peripheral system. So, in our bones, in our organs, primarily responsible for immune function as well. So I'm going to see if I can share let me see if I can share my screen. I have a slide about this, and it might help to do that. Can you all see that slide? Okay, great. So you can see there that we have some endogenous cannabinoids on the left-hand side. It says anandamide and 2-AG. We also those are the ones that are most often talked about, but we have other endogenous cannabinoids as well. The hemp variety of the plant, the cannabis variety of the plant, actually has about 115 cannabinoids. So we hear about CBD and THC all the time, but there's over 100 cannabinoids, and there's actually about 400 natural chemical components to the plant. So it's really interesting, and it's very similar to our essential oils. When you're using an essential oil, you have so many different natural chemical components to the oil, and that's what really makes them work so well. It's the pharmaceutical model that wants to isolate, make it a chemical, and so they can patent it and make some money off of it. And so that's one model. And then the other model is, whole plant botanical extracts, which I believe very strongly in. So you can see there are CB1 and CB2 receptors, that the CB1 receptors are in the brain, and that the CB2 receptors are located in all of those systems: immune system, the GI tract, the peripheral nervous system, our heart, liver, bones, our reproductive organs. So one of the things that was mentioned in the presentation was that that CBD doesn't bind to the receptors. And so he was mentioning that Copaiba oil, because it binds to the CB2 receptors, is better, that it has a direct link to that receptor, and fits almost like a lock and key into that receptor. And so the assumption there was that Copaiba oil is going to be better. What I want to say is that I don't think it's about one or the other being better. I think that they're complementary. As soon as we could order Copaiba oil, we did, and we're using that. I'm using that. My son's using that. And he's used CBD product every day, multiple times a day for the last 5+ years. So I think that they can be used in conjunction with each other. It is true that THC binds to the CB1 receptors in the brain, but it's also true that when you take CBD, it is what's called a FAAH inhibitor, and so that also causes chemicals to bind in the brain. So because THC binds to the brain doesn't necessarily mean that's what's making it psychoactive. So that was another point that was brought up. There are other things that bind to the CB1 receptors that are not psychoactive. In fact, our endogenous cannabinoid, which is called anandamide, is most molecularly structurally similar to THC, the psychoactive component in the cannabis plant, and anandamide binds to that receptor. And you're constantly making anandamide all day. And that's the whole point of healing and homeostasis is your body's responsive. If you have trauma, receptors go to the point of trauma. So imagine if I were to walk up to Keith and I were to punch him in the arm as hard as I could, and it kind of gets hot there and it might be throbbing. His CB2 receptors are traveling to the point of the trauma. And then his body is making endocannabinoids and sending it to the point of the trauma to heal. We're really meant to heal. Our bodies are meant to heal themselves. And so there's a lot of theories about, why that's not happening, whether it's our toxic overload, whether it's stress, whether we have an endocannabinoid deficiency. But what we do know is that we can take phytocannabinoids or plant-based cannabinoids and do the same thing that our body's trying to do naturally. So Copaiba oil is one way to do that. That's one way to take essentially a phytocannabinoid. In this case, it's beta-caryophyllene, very high. This oil is very high in beta-caryophyllene, and that binds to the CB2 receptors. So I think that you can use them in conjunction with each other. So I want to see if I can unshare my screen. Is that on the...
It should be right at the top. You should see a thing that says stop share.
Perfect. Okay. Got it. And let me pull up my notes and see what else we want to talk about. So I want to talk a little bit more about some of the beneficial properties of CBD. So I talked about Copaiba oil, and I talked about it being an anti-inflammatory and helping with toxins that are in our body, and anti-cancerous and antimicrobial. There's a lot of those similar properties actually to CBD. So I want to talk a little bit about how that works. It does modulate, so CBD in the body modulates the entire endocannabinoid system. So as far as neurological function, it modulates how our neurons fire. So it will actually speed them up or slow them down. So a lot of people are using CBD for epilepsy, which is an overexcitement of the neurons firing in the brain, and too much of that, then you end up with a seizure. And so it actually is I call it a smart molecule on a couple of our systems. One is the neurological system. So if neurons need to be sped up, that's what it'll do. And if they need to be slowed down, that's what it'll do. It does the same thing on our immune system. So cannabidiol on our immune system in cases of an overactive immune system, like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, and lots of odd autoimmune disorders popping up these last 10 years or so. It's a smart molecule on that system, and it's going to turn down immune function or it'll turn it up. So my son was on long-term steroid use, and his immune function was just tanked. And he didn't have so much as a runny nose after being on CBD for a while. So it can turn up your immune system as well. Cannabidiol acts on the same receptors that antidepressants and anxiolytics, or the anti-anxiety drugs, act on. Those are called 5-HT1A receptors, if you're a geek and you want the term. So it actually acts on the same receptors that antidepressants and anxiolytics act on. It acts on our opiate receptors, which is how we perceive pain. It acts on GABA. It decreases glutamate. It regulates our calcium channels. It modulates our ion channels. It enhances adenosine, and so does beta-caryophyllene, which they're both very high in. Adenosine is amazing. It's our endogenous anti-inflammatory system, or our endogenous inflammatory chemical, rather. And every single cell in your body has a receptor for adenosine. So to be able to turn up your adenosine production as an anti-inflammatory is really pretty cool. And so both Copaiba oil and CBD both do that. And then many, many other functions. I think those were some of the really interesting things that CBD does that a lot of people are using it for. Let me pull up my notes one more time. So beta-caryophyllene. There was a study that was done using Copaiba oil, and it was a rat model. A lot of the studies are mice and rat model. They're animal model. They do some in vivo studies. They do some in vitro studies. And so the whole double-blind, placebo-controlled trials are very difficult to get accomplished with hemp and cannabis particularly, and very expensive to get accomplished with things like essential oils. So you don't see a lot of the golden standard of research, the double-blind placebo-controlled trials, but there was some really interesting research done in regards to ischemic events with rats. So that means they stopped breathing. And so then in general, what happens is they can have some really poor outcomes. And so they were using Copaiba oil. And they also did this with CBD. That's why I was attracted to this piece of research, because they've done the same thing with CBD. And they're seeing some both neuroprotective effects with both of these products when there's a lack of oxygen. And Copaiba oil was actually used, they injected, this is sad, neurotoxins essentially. Neurotoxins into the rats, and then administered Copaiba oil, and they had better outcomes. So there's, again, go to PubMed and check out some of the research. So beta-caryophyllene, I think, is kind of the unicorn here. I think that is what has the anti-inflammatory properties. That is what does indeed bind to the CB2 receptors and activates those receptors, which is really interesting. And Copaiba is the only oil, it's not the only oil, it's the highest source oil of natural beta-caryophyllene. So I think that's really interesting. You can also use black pepper, ylang ylang, melissa, clove and rosemary have some beta-caryophyllene to a lesser extent. So you can buy just BCP is what they call it, beta-caryophyllene, on the market as well. So I think that there's a lot of different sources of beta-caryophyllene, but Copaiba is definitely the highest source that's available naturally, and it is indeed higher in that oil than it is in the hemp variety plant. So I think that's also something to keep in mind. So I wanted to allow for plenty of time for questions if people had any questions. or Keith and Carrie, if you guys had questions. I wanted to give a little bit of the scientific background, and that I think that these things can be used really complementary to each other. Let me pull up, just in case you guys want it, resource for the realm of caring. So it's not the realm of caring show here, that's for sure. But if you have families that may need our resources, I definitely wanted to put this up for you.
Your website's realmofcaring.org?
Yeah, it's The Rock, THEROC.US, and there's our phone number, and there's our email. So if you've got folks that are dealing with some pretty serious health concerns, particularly neurological in nature, chronic pain, inflammatory kinds of diseases and autoimmune diseases, Realm of Caring may be a good source for you to get your loved ones or your folks to our resources. We have a really extensive website for both physicians and people that are using cannabis as therapy. We have pioneered some dosing recommendations over the last several years, and again are trying to really move the research forward. So there's us if you want to get in touch with us, and then so let's ask some questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch the view here to the gallery view so we can see a little bit more of who's here. The only question I had, you already answered, and which was, how does the concentration of beta-caryophyllene in Copaiba relate to CBD? Because my understanding is that to like sort of your point, what you said earlier, like when we try to isolate the components to synthesize and pharmaceuticalize.
That's a word.
That's not a word, but if I can spell it in my house, it's a word. So I'm going to roll with that. That you got to kind of have all the parts, right? So not to suggest that the higher the beta-caryophyllene, the better the product. But I know for those that wanted to know, that was one of my questions, was what was that percentage like? And I know that some of the companies you work with, it's proprietary information. So just knowing that it's at least on the same par, maybe a little bit more, is really the one question I had. Are there any other questions?
And also, just for everyone, if you want to look up a term called the entourage effect, if you were to go to PubMed or just search entourage effect for, particularly with plants, you're going to see some really strong indications that the parts are greater than the whole. So all the different components give a better synergistic effect than the isolation of certain components. So entourage effect is the actual term for that.
Perfect. Awesome. And I'm using our chat function to kind of type some of that so people will see it.
Okay.
So I'm not ignoring you. I'm just putting stuff up from. One of the questions we have is we're just wanting to confirm that you were referring to CBD as the compound that acts on the same receptors as antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication.
Yes. So CBD acts on 5-HT1A receptors. And those are the same receptors that are the target of antidepressants and anxiolytic drugs. So yes, that's correct.
Perfect. And beta-caryophyllene is part of the cocktail that works on that?
Not on those receptors. Beta-caryophyllene primarily is going to increase your adenosine, that endogenous anti-inflammatory component, which is why you're seeing some neuroprotective effects and things like that. And then also it does bind with the CB2 receptors. So that's what beta-caryophyllene is doing.
Okay.
So I have a question on CBD. So you had said CBD, excuse my notes. has less than 0.3% THC. So I have a two-part question. One, what would be considered high? And my second part of the question is, if I got a product, a CBD oil per se, would it list on there the percentage of it?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, hemp-based products that are high in CBD are less than 0.3% THC. So the products that are being shipped across state lines and being shipped to other countries, those are derived from industrial hemp. And really, I want to break this down too. I call it therapeutic hemp as opposed to industrial hemp. So it's basically just a different variety. Like you would have a Gala apple versus a Granny Smith apple. Okay, so there is industrial hemp that's generally used for seeds and stock. And they also can derive hemp oil from that variety of hemp. This is a therapeutic strain. Really, chemovar is the correct term to use. A strain, I don't even like to use that anymore. But there's a therapeutic hemp that is very high in CBD. And if it's being shipped over state lines, and it needs to meet a couple of criteria. It needs to have been grown under a research and development license with a university or state agriculture. So that's how most people are doing it. In Colorado, it's underneath the Department of Agriculture here, and it does have to test less than 0.3% THC. Now, what would be considered high THC? I think everyone's so individual. I think that some people can have some psychoactive effect with about 3 milligrams of THC. And so you could get there taking one of these products if you just took a big swig of it and drank half the bottle. You would probably have some psychoactive effect. So that answers that question. But some people need up to 10 milligrams to feel a psychoactive effect. Everybody's very, very different. Now, in regards to the percentage, you will have some difficulty reading these labels, because if it says a CBD percentage of 15%, that doesn't tell you at all how many milligrams are actually in it. And so that's one of the things that the care team helps with at the Realm of Caring, is figuring this whole thing out, because you really need to know not percentages per se, but actually how many milligrams. That's how you're going to know exactly what you're taking and whether you need to take more or whether you need to take less. So some will list the actual milligrams and some will list percentages, which makes it very difficult to decipher.
Okay.
I think we're related. Oh, no, we're good.
Nope, we're good. One of the questions that came up in the chat box was, how did the receptors travel? I'm not sure specifically. Chris, feel free to unmute yourself, or I can do that on my end if you want to just ask that to be more specific.
Sure. Hi, Heather. I wanted to know, you were saying that receptors traveled to an area, like I think the example was if you hit Keith in the arm and it got hot and it hurt, et cetera, et cetera. How are receptors traveling? Are you actually referring to just cells traveling, like a immune response for like an antibiotic effect or something, or
the cells actually, in response to the trauma, will go to trauma. So how they do that, I don't know scientifically how they do that. But what we do know is when brains have been dissected of mice that have, for example, a focal epilepsy, all the CB1 receptors are extremely concentrated in the area where the epilepsy was happening. We found this in mice that had irritable bowel syndrome. There was another mice model where they had GI issues and the gut was just riddled with CB2 receptors and the source of trauma. So like post-mortem, essentially, when they're looking at animal models, wherever the source of trauma is that the receptors are extremely riddled there.
Okay.
Also, there's some research that it shows, for example, in after head trauma, so concussion, for example, our anandamide levels, our endogenous cannabinoid levels are extremely high after source of trauma. So again, our body is trying to heal itself. So
Right.
this whole system is incredibly responsive.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You bet.
Do we have any other questions or comments or thoughts?
If you guys don't, I do.
Feel free to type them in, raise your hand. There's a little function to raise your hand, or just unmute yourself and jump in. No one's going to get offended if you interrupt. Stephanie says she'll need to rewatch this to absorb all of this info. I'm right there with you. I'm glad this is being recorded. And
I'm gonna dub it as I'm sleeping
Right.
to get it into my subconscious.
There's we also do an orientation that is a deep dive, this kind of on steroids, every other week. So every other Tuesday we have an orientation at Realm of Caring, and then monthly we do one for physicians. So you can continue to get this information over and over again if it's interesting to you.
Okay, so I'm gonna push the boundaries a little bit.
Yep.
So CBD, Copaiba, both can help with the inflammatory response in the body. From my background and what I know is when there's inflammation in the body, the root cause of that can be from an overproduction of candida in the body. So would you say that somebody can use either one of these products or both of their products to help aid in what they're currently experiencing, yet it's not going to address the root cause of that inflammation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we've seen, especially in like our folks that have Lyme's disease, and when they're using cannabidiol, for example, it's an antibacterial, it's an antimicrobial, and it's going to help the spirochetes die off. It'll actually kill them. And so we do see some Herxheimer response, which is, that the real kind of those negative side effects that can happen. And so we do see some of that with cannabidiol. Cannabidiol works on a cellular level, which is really important to note. And I think that, my understanding about essential oils is that they do the same thing. They're lipophilic. The body recognizes them as another organic substance and knows what to do with that. And so my understanding of both is that they both really work on a cellular level to try and address the underlying issue. And I think if for no other reason, the anti-inflammatory properties is one reason why we should be using Copaiba every single day.
Right. Awesome.
So
Thank you.
we have two questions. One is you had mentioned that with head trauma, CB2 receptors or CB1 receptors were noticed in high concentration. Would you mind sort of expanding on that a little bit? We have at least one person on the call who's had a severe concussion, had some head trauma, that is asking about that. And then I'll ask the other question after that.
Okay, that sounds good. I was just going to write down the next one because
it's totally irrelevant.
So, in regards to head trauma, traumatic brain injuries, cannabinoids are actually patented. So the government, actually, the U.S. government holds a patent on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants and antioxidants. And so more than just being a neuroprotectant, we're actually seeing neurogenesis happen, which is extremely exciting. So I'm going to try and pull up, I'm going to pull up a slide. I think that CBD holds a lot of promise in head trauma. I also think it holds a lot of promise in mental health, because we just don't have a ton of options in those areas. So here is your real brain on drugs. So I'm a byproduct of the 80s. This is your brain on drugs with the egg in the frying pan. And, I really thought, when I was making this choice for my son, I was like, what am I doing? Like, he already has neurological issues. I don't need to be killing any brain cells here. What am I actually doing here? It was really a quality of life decision. But now the more that I've researched this and the more that I understand, it's actually, cannabis on the brain is neuroprotectant, and it's also causing neurogenesis. So every area here that you see in the slide where it's really bright, so the cerebellum, our decision-making center, has a lot of CB1 receptors. The hippocampus. There's a couple of things about this slide. Number one, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and there's not a lot of things that do. So that's pretty exciting. Number two, it's getting to very deep recesses in the brain and trying to do some healing work there, which is also very exciting. And the neurogenesis properties, meaning new synapses forming, new neuronal pathways happening in sections of the brain as well. The other, just kind of the third point, is this brainstem that you see is extremely dark, that there are virtually almost no receptors in the brainstem, and that's why people will not die of an overdose. Can you overdose on cannabis, like high THC cannabis? Oh yeah, you can, and be extremely uncomfortable, and you might have, heard the emergency room phone calls, right? Or like they're calling 911 saying, yeah, I'm dead. I'm pretty sure I'm dead, because they've just, taken an edible or something and gotten totally, to the other side. So can you overdose? Yes. Can you die from overdose? No, that's actually never happened. So that's how it's happening in the brain and with brain trauma. And so neuroprotection and neurogenesis, very exciting. And what was the second question?
Well, now we have all kinds of questions. Now they're coming in.
Now they've caught up with all of your science stuff, so now they're like on it.
Yeah. So one real quick one is when you were talking about crossing the blood-brain barrier, my understanding is you were talking about CBD specifically. Do you know, or are you able to speak to whether or not Copaiba specifically crosses the blood-brain barrier?
I don't know. I'm going to have to research that. The answer is I don't know, and that's my promise. Is that when I don't know, I'm going to say I don't know. I'm not going to make stuff up. Now, frankincense, of course, we know crosses the blood-brain barrier, so it's a very strong possibility that Copaiba does. I didn't read about that yet.
Okay, awesome.
It'd be a good thing to look up.
Yeah, so we'll dig into that too, and let's collaborate and see what we find. Someone asked, they were curious to know the effects of Copaiba on a child with autism specifically.
Yeah, I think that because there's some immune, does this person have a child with epilepsy?
I don't know, Kelly, you're welcome to, I can unmute you and you can dig in a little bit more if you'd like.
I mean autism.
It's actually a friend of mine's son has autism.
Okay. So they're really looking towards a lot of interesting new causes for autism. My son is also on the spectrum, and one of them is immune related. And so the fact that we've got a ton of CB2 receptors in our gut, which is called our second brain, and the fact that Copaiba acts on those CB2 receptors, for me, is a strong indication that would be a good thing to introduce and give a try. We do have a lot of people using CBD for autism. It's our second highest diagnosis in our pediatric population. Because it's controlling, again, how the neurons fire. It's helping with with inflammation and those sorts of things. So I think it would be a great thing to introduce. And also, I got a really neat protocol from Tiffany called Symphony of the Cells. And so maybe reach out afterwards to Tiffany or myself. And I've been using it with my son probably, I want to say maybe a month and a half or so now. Tiffany's had a little bit of success as well. And this is sort of they have neurological protocols, they have immune protocols. And not only do I find it very satisfying, so I do it every night, and it's, it's beautiful. It's touch. You're touching your kiddo. You're applying these oils. You're just loving on them and giving them all the good energy. And I've found it really satisfying for me personally. Zakai loves it. And so that would be maybe another protocol you might consider looking at. But your first question, yeah, it's not going to hurt. This whole thing falls underneath my do no harm policy. We're not gonna hurt anyone. It might not work. But no one's going to get hurt. And that's the thing about options. And that's the beautiful thing about hope. When we have options, we now have hope. So, I would definitely give it a try.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, Tiffany has been very gracious to share that Symphony of Cells protocol. And so, I'm sure
They're coming in Denver, like in January. So I want to try and go check him out.
Yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Symphony of the Cells is a sort of it's a collection of protocols, really, that address a lot of different challenges with systems in the body. And it's a way to apply oils and certain oils that you can apply. You can do it for yourself. You can have someone else do it for you. It was developed, I'm pretty certain, by Boyd Truman. I don't know who collaborated on it with him, but he travels and he teaches it. He's in Denver once or twice a year. I think it's $150 or $185 to take the class. It's an all-day thing. Carrie is we have the book, and Carrie is definitely interested in going to the next one.
Me too.
So Symphony of Cells is a really great thing. It's sort of, if you're familiar with the aroma touch technique, it's kind of like that, but more specific to different body systems. And I refer to it as like ATT on steroids. Really cool. And I loved your testimonial for it, because there is a lot to be said about that. Taking the time to connect with your child, connect with your loved one, share that experience. So that's the other piece, right? Like the oils are great, but also the connection and sharing just that positive energy was awesome. So I love the way you described that. I think we have one other question.
I just found the chat, the long-term use of. I just opened that.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Someone was asking about long-term use.
Yeah, long-term use. I think that's a really good question. It was something I thought a lot about before I started using this, with my kiddo. What I want to say is that the plant has been used medicinally for documented at least 1,000 years. 2737 BC in China for epilepsy specifically. And so I am, my son's used it every day for 5 years, which is longer than he's ever taken any sort of pharmaceutical. So I think that sometimes we're trying to hold these things to a standard that we don't actually hold FDA approved drugs to. And I think that that's sort of bizarre. I want to give you a real brief example. So for example, we're just talking about, let me just talk about epilepsy. And Chris, I know, you have a loved one with epilepsy too. That when you look at the FDA approved list of drugs for children with epilepsy, what you don't find on that list, if you go directly to the FDA website, you do not find barbiturates on that list. You do not find benzodiazepines on that list. They're not there. They're not approved for children with epilepsy. I'm sure you have them in your drug cabinet for status seizures. I gave them to my son for status seizures. His first drug was Depakote, which is not approved for under 10 years old. It's approved for only 2 seizure types. My son didn't have either one of those 2 seizure types, and a doctor can pull out a prescription pad and now give me an off-label or non-FDA approved treatment. So I think that sometimes we try and hold plant medicine to a standard that we're not holding pharmaceuticals to. So is there long-term research in regards to the effects of cannabis being used long-term? It's all anecdotal. No one's ever died. The lethal dose rating is 1 to 20,000. So by comparison, aspirin is 1 to 20. So 2 aspirin helped my headache. 40 would actually kill 50% of the people who took it. And cannabis is 10,000 times less toxic than that. So like a long-term study of people and the effects on their, no, that we really don't have that. But it is a plant that we've used medicinally for thousands of years. So I'd be a little bit more concerned if it was an isolated chemical that we came up with in the lab last week. So it's actually not a big concern for me. It's a plant. And I don't have a naturalistic fallacy. And what I mean by that is I don't think that all plant and everything nature provides is healthy for us and it's never going to harm us. I know that that's not the case, but what I do understand about the cannabis plant is there is a ton of research in regards to its virtual non-toxicity. So I'm not real concerned about that. And CBD has been in the plant the entire time. So I'm also not personally very concerned about that.
Have you been able to see a long-term, or in long-term use, do you see a reduction of the amount having to be used once the body becomes balanced?
Yes,
I guess
that's almost consistently what we see is with time, people needing to lower their doses for a couple of reasons. Again, that the issue being corrected, that this is working on a cellular level and you just need less. Our endocannabinoid system gets saturated. So think about it like a sponge, and you're pouring water in the sponge, and after the sponge is full of water, the water just overflows off of that sponge. Our endocannabinoid system is very similar in that when all those receptors are taken up, it just doesn't have anywhere to go. And so what we actually see is what's called a bell-shaped response curve, meaning too low a dose, right, it doesn't help. Too high a dose, it doesn't help. But there's actually a perfect window for everyone individually, and that with time, due to that system being saturated and perhaps an actual correction of the underlying issue that's causing those symptoms, that people are actually lowering their dose. So when my son needed to get full control in the very beginning, 600 milligrams of CBD. This is a hefty dose. Now we got all the way down to 75 milligrams every other day. And right now, with his seizures being back, we're at 200 milligrams a day. So yes, you're absolutely correct. That is what we see.
Okay, so you could technically reduce for a while, and then maybe once the CBD is used up off of the receptors, you may need to go back up a little, or
and actually what we call is, I've heard it referred to as challenging the endocannabinoid system. So skipping a dose, a lower dose, a higher dose, unlike pharmaceuticals where it's, you've got to take that dose, you got to take it on time, you got to, or you really deal with some kind of crazy withdrawal effects. This is not like that. So there are some tricks and some methods that can be used, and I would encourage you to reach out to Realm of Caring and talk with some care specialists about that. Or if you know someone who's been on it for a long time, do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly, did you have a question? Nope. Okay. I don't see any other questions. I know this is completely unscientific, but my thoughts on the, like you said, like plant medicine and how it's held to this different standard. I've seen quite a few questions or conversations around that same sort of topic. Like, at some point, do we become immune to the oils like we do antibiotics or things of that nature? And I think it's because we call it at times plant medicine, and so we start to think of it as medicinal, right? And we know how those synthetics work, and I always just kind of sort of go back to the, like, you'll eat carrots your entire life, knowing that you're going to get those vitamin A or whatever, vitamin K or whatever it is, right? We don't ever become immune to that.
Right.
And it's what we need, and it's bringing our body into balance, right? We're putting things into our system that we actually need versus, our body's designed to reject foreign objects. So of course we're going to develop evolutionary, like a way, antibodies are going to prevent. So I know that's like got zero scientific basis in it, but for those of you that maybe are looking for an analogy or a way to help someone understand that, that's the way my brain processes it.
I think that's a great analogy. Yeah, you're not going to stop receiving the vitamins from the from the plant. What would make you think that, the other beneficial properties would go away with long-term use? And I think that you'd probably see them not working at some point if that was the case. And I mean, I haven't noticed that. I sometimes wonder if I'm overusing or over diffusing, or I've got them I've got it at work. I've got it, like my dad was in the hospital for 2 months in ICU and in a coma, like I'm like rubbing his feet and we've got to, and it's like, I don't know. I think it depends on our philosophy, and I don't know. I think it's how it was given to us, and I think it's my first go-to. And I'm not anti-pharma by any stretch of the imagination. I think it has its place. I think that there is a large population of people that are very underserved by that model, and sometimes harmed by that model. And so I feel like we have such a great and awesome responsibility to be able to, share this with people. And again, it's just more options, and we can't be opposed to that.
Yeah. Awesome. I think
there were a couple more questions that popped up. I don't know if you want to end it and I can reply to those later, or.
Yeah, what I was going to say is we usually try to keep it to an hour. So Carrie and I don't have anywhere to go. We're happy to stay. I want to honor your time. So if your time allows and you want to field those questions, great.
Sure.
I just, as we hit that 1 hour mark, let people know that if they need to jump off, this is being recorded. We will post the recording. We weren't able to see the screen share on this end, so I don't know if it recorded or not. So we had some screenshots and we posted that on the Facebook page so people can, reference those. But we're happy to stick around.
Okay.
I think the question was about prescription required for Colorado. My understanding, and Tiffany, and it looks like you answered this, is that CBD oil, and I was ignorant about this because I had reached out to Heather a few months ago and said, hey, I have friends who want to get CBD oil. How do they do that? And she's like, just go online. It's available everywhere. It's not that hard to get, but people have this perception that it's, this dark alley, backwoods kind of thing, and it's not necessarily.
Yeah. So here's the caveat. So a script, do you need a prescription? The answer is no, if it's hemp based. So this individual lives in Colorado. So if it's hemp, so if it's less than 0.3% THC and it is grown as hemp, okay, so there is some CBD products that are grown underneath the Marijuana Enforcement Division, the MED, that's cannabis. You have to get that, from a dispensary. Now, this hemp-based product, stuff that's just being grown underneath either a research and development license or a Department of Agriculture, not just in Colorado, there's many states that allow for hemp cultivation, then no, you don't need a script, a prescription, or anything like that, nor do you need to go through your state's process to receive a cannabis license. So in Colorado, I think they call it a red card, right? But it's purple now, which is silly. But anyway, so do you need to go get a doctor's recommendation to go get this? The answer is no if it's grown as hemp. Now, if you're getting it from a dispensary or something like that, then yes, you'd need to do that. And also, I think that it's you're asking good questions, and this is still a kind of a gray area. When you talk about this, you should understand that the DEA's position statement. The DEA's position statement is any traceable amount of THC is illegal. It's a Schedule I substance. That's their position statement. I say that that's a position statement because it's not law. It's not, no one, the POTUS hasn't signed anything. It's simply their position statement. So did you know, technically, according to the DEA, hemp milk, hemp seeds, hemp granola bars, those are all technically illegal. There was a court decision, Ninth District Court decision that said, hey, this is silly. This is unenforceable. We're importing this stuff by the billions of dollars every year. So it's a gray area, and we do have a blog about that on the Realm of Caring website. So there's some federal protections, there's some state protections, but it's also, you should be very aware that it's a gray area. Another really common question that's asked that no one asked here is, will I test positive on a drug test? So I work for the government. Am I gonna pop hot on a drug test?
Sure.
The answer is that you could. So even these low level, there's about 8 different research articles that have been done. Even hemp milk and hemp seed, if you're consuming a lot of those products, knowing that this is lipophilic, remember, that this builds up in our fatty tissue, you could test positive. We recently did a metabolite study, and most people did test positive at 20 nanograms. Almost no one tested positive over 50. And 50 is what the federal government standard is, and probably your employer. But you should be aware of that. Like, if your job depends upon it, I would not be using these hemp-based products because you could test positive.
One more question.
Certain brand or company. Yeah, one of the important things is to be able to assess the quality of the products. So Realm of Caring has a few products that we support or endorse, and that's because I've worked through a very extensive quality checklist. And so we have about 3 products that we support. And so go to the Realm of Caring website, and you can take a look there.
Like how she did that.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be like a commercial. My son has used the same product for a very long time. Let me see.
And I can address Kelly's question. There is no, Copaiba doesn't come from the hemp or industrial hemp or marijuana plant or any of that. So there's zero THC in that particular product. Correct.
That is right. Good point. Yeah, that comes from a tree.
Yeah. That's why a lot of military-based families are jumping on the bandwagon of Copaiba, and yet not understanding that it's not a one oil fits all, right? Like we just learned that it suits so many cannabinoids receptors, and CBD treats the others. So
I will share with
pretty interesting to watch how our society is taking to this awesome education
when things don't work, right? I will share with you the few of you that stuck around for the extended version. We received word today that while supply is available and we have plenty because of post-convention, because of the I'll say wild popularity of Copaiba, if your LRP is scheduled to run in the next 10 days or so, it may be delayed a day or two, or it may be shipped without Copaiba, and that will be sent to you at a later date, because it has been wildly popular. So you may see that in the back office, I believe it's been marked out of stock or on back order. If not yet, it will be soon. And assure your teams and your people that you can't that they will be able to get it. It's not like Melissa where it'll be gone for the next 6 months and they missed the boat. And they have held back enough to fulfill the needs post-convention tour. What they think will be, we know how well they do that. So we'll see how that works out.
If the wellness advocates do not take advantage of the promotion.
Yes, if you.
That is when we get screwed.
Yes, please.
So please
keep it to post-convention attendees and post-convention people.
Yes. Stephanie, they will talk about Copaiba at your post-convention tour, as well as all of our other brand new products. And we had how many? Eight or nine. Yeah, eight or nine new oils. They will cover those at your post-convention tour.
Yeah, and they certainly won't get into it. Like at our post-convention tour, they sort of glazed over it. I think the presenter was not super comfortable diving deep into it because it can be controversial, and we are in Colorado where there's a lot of people that are educated about this particular conversation, but they will be covering it to some extent. Eric Larson is at your event. Brianne Houston's at your event. They're pretty solid folks. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there for those of you that stuck around. Are there any other questions? Is there anything, Heather, that you want to tie it up with a bow? You want to? That's Carrie's favorite thing to do.
Question.
Tracy has a question. Hold on, I'm going to unmute. Hold on. Where I lost my mouse.
Hold on, you're muted.
Oh, you're good. Yep, I can hear you now.
So you mentioned cannabis and hemp. I was under the impression that they're the same thing. Is that not correct?
Yeah, so that's also a very good question. So all hemp is cannabis, but not all cannabis is hemp. So yes, it's the exact same species. So cannabis sativa L is the scientific name, and varieties that are less than that 0.3% THC are considered hemp.
Oh, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, is that a wrap?
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity. I will at some point write a blog about this, so you all might be able to refer to that, and it will be sourced with all the great research that already exists. And I just want to tell you, I'm super proud and honored and grateful to be a part of the community, the doTERRA community, people who believe in trying to figure out natural solutions, for our health and for our families, first of all, and for those that we love. So I thank you for the opportunity. I'm really glad to be able to educate you all on the topic. And anytime you want to have me back, let me know.
Thank you.
Every week. You're welcome. I like your perspective, your voice, your willingness to share. I know that your passion lies with Realm of Caring, and that you incorporate doTERRA. My selfish prayer is that someday those two become a little more.
I know, I'm so attracted to doTERRA and the business model and this social enterprising aspect. I am obsessed with social enterprising. I just love everything about it. And I feel like probably, I always think I'm going to be around this corner. I'm going to be slowing down. But yeah, I
for the 2 years I've known you, that's been anything but the case.
It's going the total other direction. But yeah, I love my oils. Yeah, I love it. I love both. And it's seriously my passion. I just plant medicine. I've just become so attracted to that and that option and that lifestyle and all of that. So yeah, so thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Well, knowing that we have you as a resource to tap into when we need is I'll take that for now.
Yeah,
so
great.
Thank you so much, and I know our team values you and appreciates your knowledge. And I wouldn't be surprised if we had a couple of Heather is on the team page. You can tag her in questions. I don't think she's on Facebook a ton. She's got family and other things to take care of, but you can tag her, and I know how to get it.
I'll respond. If
I know how to get it. I know how to track her down.
If I'm not tagged, I probably won't even see it. So yeah, make sure you at Heather Barnes Jackson is my Facebook name, and I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye,
everybody
everyone.
for sticking around. We'll post this up. We'll share the video. I will make just a quick note for those of you that are on live and those of you that see the video. We put this on our private YouTube channel that they have to have the link to go to watch. We are happy to share this with our team, and we're happy to grant you permission to share it with people that you trust and that are close to you. We do ask that you don't share this widely and publicly. Some of the conversations that we have, we talked heavily about realm of caring and those sorts of things. I don't need Heather getting a flood of emails from the outside world, that sort of thing. Like, we want to protect her.
I would love for Realm of Caring to get a flood of emails from the outside world.
Yeah, no, I know. We say
Definitely use us as a resource. I didn't say anything in this video that I don't say every single day, and often publicly from stage somewhere. So, it doesn't matter to me. It was all science. It's my kiddo's history. He's still here. He's thriving. He's learning. So yeah, I'm your rules keep for sure, but just know I don't care.
Yeah.
We're an available resource, and I love community that's trying to heal themselves.
Yeah, and we certainly appreciate that. And if there's a question,
my FDA compliant language probably isn't up to par, but
yeah, so, I know we're not.
That might be the problem.
We are rarely compliant, so that is a small piece of it. So just be mindful is what I'm trying to say when you share it and how you share it and who you share it with. And yes, by all means, get the story out. Let people know that there's these resources for them, because what so many families are suffering with and dealing with isn't working. And that is our mission, is to provide hope. Like, I love that you touched on hope, because it really is such an integral part of what we do and why we do it. So I will leave you with that. You guys have a great Wednesday, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week on Business Basics and on the Facebook page. We'll see you there, guys. Enjoy post-convention if you're in LA area. Have fun.
Bye, guys. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.